So it's been a cool summer, but it's hot now.
It's beating. Yeah, it's very warm in Texas. That's for sure.
Well, it's August.
Yeah. What do you expect?
August in Texas is what sells lots of swimming pools.
It does. Yeah, that and a lot of fans. So upgrade your AC units, upgrade your pool.
Well, they even built a stadium here that the Rangers can play in that has a roof on it, so they can have air conditioning.
Thank goodness, because every time I went to a Rangers game, I would always get a sunburn, and now that doesn't happen anymore. And they got that stadium's awesome. I love it. So,
well, we've got some interesting things to talk about today.
yeah. Speaking of monstrous structures.
Yeah, so this has to do with hillsides. And most people think of Texas, they think of West Texas, which is flat.
Yeah, Lubbock.
Yeah. Where I grew up, there wasn't much to deal with from a hillside standpoint.
Yeah, tumbleweeds and dirt devils. So.
Yeah. But here in North Texas, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, there is quite a bit of hillsides. And it just depends on where you're at. There's some parts of the Metroplex that are fairly flat, but there's others that have quite a bit of grade change.
Yeah.
And that is something that I've dealt with more and more frequency, to the point now almost every project that I work on is a hillside.
It's kind of your niche, the hillside. And a lot of people might think a hillside, they're thinking like hill country, just a drop in elevation, significant drop.
And you go down to Austin, there's some significant drop down there.
Yeah.
So here, most of ours is, gentle rolling. And the projects that I'm looking at are typically, 3 feet to 30 feet of elevation change. It's not all over the place and hundreds of feet or anything like that they're trying to deal with.
Well, there's been jobs that we've measured on lakes that drop a significant amount. And there's places in Dallas that I think Dallas, and I don't necessarily think hills, but I mean, there's some jobs I've measured where I've like, wow, I almost just fell off a cliff.
There are some definite surprises out there.
Oh, yeah.
that you can find. So
some cool views.
When I walk onto some yards, my standard joke is you have a great place for a stream. The only problem is you asked for a pool.
Yeah.
And pools require a place that water can pool, and there's not a place on your yard that will happen. So we have to create that.
Yeah.
And so that usually requires putting walls in and coming up with a flat spot that we can work with. Now, the first thing that you have to understand is a lot of times those pieces of property have existing walls on them.
Okay.
And when you have a lot of existing walls and you're dealing with hillsides, the challenge here in Texas is you don't necessarily have to have certified backfill with all those retaining walls.
I gotcha.
So you don't know if a backyard might have 6 feet of fill dirt sitting in it.
Yeah. Dirt becomes a big portion of hillsides.
So understanding what you're dealing with to start with is critical. Now, we were talking about, well, how do you figure that out? When we were talking earlier.
Yeah.
And you came up with the best answer.
A soil sample.
A soil sample is great. So you could come in and do a soil sample and understand, oh, here's where the new dirt was brought in. Here's where the original soil is. And that works great. But some of these yards are so small and they have retaining walls on both sides that there's no way you can get that equipment into the backyard.
So, and I know we talked about this before. So some people might just core a soil sample in the front yard. And technically that might not be the same dirt that it was backfilled with.
If you've got a retaining wall on the back of the property, whether it's holding dirt up or it's, you're the high one or you're the low one, it's holding dirt in one form or fashion. Yes, you don't know at the top of that wall or the bottom of that wall if there's been fill dirt put there.
Yeah. Now, would a soil sample, because I know it tells you the type of dirt and type of clay, type of rock, all that kind of stuff, but will it tell you the compaction of the dirt?
What it would tell you is where it changes.
Okay, that makes sense.
So you could tell if, oh, there's this much brought in. And then you can also look at some things to see the chances are, is the bottom of my pool going to sit in original soil, or is it going to be still, up in the floating, fill dirt?
So that you would look for trees, but if there's no trees.
So yeah, the ideal thing would be if there's existing trees on the property, that's going to be the existing grades, but there may not be. The other thing is there's sometimes really old pieces of property and trees have been planted.
Yeah.
And now that soil maybe is going to be more stable over a period of time. Here's what you need to do. You need to talk to the engineer that you're going to work with and see what their recommendations are in those situations. So, but that's one of the most important things is you have to have something stable to build on.
Yeah.
And so how am I going to establish and know what is stable and what is not to start with? So that's your first objective. The second thing is we have to measure what's there.
Okay.
So if we understand what's there, then we can create a solution that's accurate.
Yeah.
So you get to do that on a
all
daily situation.
Oh yeah, I do that a lot. Yeah.
So how do you explain the method you use?
So I'll start by measuring yard. I'll obviously talk to the homeowner, make sure it's good to go in the backyard, but I'll use we usually get a printout of the overall overlay of the backyard if it's available. And the more information, the better before you go into the backyard to know what you're working with. But I'm trying to locate trees. I'm running tapes off of the house that are set. That way, when I'm doing my dimensions and everything like that, I'm spot on accurate. Now they have tools that do this all with your phone as well. We use a zip level. Which makes it easy for me to do it by myself and just using a bunch of measuring tapes. So that's pretty much the gist of what I do, getting every change of elevation, because we'll have a lot of jobs where they're removing, like the last, I don't know if it's the last episode, but one of the last episodes we talked about blowing it up and starting new. So there's a lot of jobs where you have to actually measure not just, the grade and the elevations of the trees, but the pre-existing pretty much what they're going to blow up, like if it's deck or whatever it is. So you want to make sure you have that there as well for demolition costs and stuff like that.
So you take the measurements and what do you do with them?
You draft them. You make a grade chart or whatever. I forgot what it's called. A topo, pretty much.
So you take all those spot elevations.
Yes.
You put all the spot elevations on your plan.
Yeah.
So you have a grid with elevations, and then you make a grading plan from that.
Yes.
The spot elevations.
Yes.
So figuring out the differences between one spot to the next spot.
6 inch increments.
6 inch increments. Yeah. So you basically come up with a topo map.
Yeah, exactly. A topo. Yeah.
And now you hand the topo to me, and then I can work up the design.
Yeah, because you don't know you can't design something if you don't know exactly what you're working with. It's like having a painter with a canvas, and you tell them to paint something, but they don't even know what the canvas is or what, like, you know what I mean? So you don't even know how to start. Some people might draw something, but
there's people that do that all the time.
Well, you need to be able to build it. That's what I'm trying to say. So you can make edits later on, but that just...
You mean you want to design something that's buildable without change orders?
Yes, exactly. That's how you flow, and so that's how I've learned. I know that's not common, but I think that is definitely ideal. So
once we have a grading plan, now we can create a design and understand what we're going to need to do. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is understand, can we work with the existing grades, or are we going to have to use piers?
Okay. Yeah.
So I had a project in Trophy Club, 2 projects next door to each other.
Okay.
And the retaining wall elevation drop down to the trees that were on the golf course was 10 foot on the first house.
Okay.
The next door neighbor, the golf course was sloping some, So the elevation change from the top of the retaining walls down to the trees on the golf course were 6 feet.
Okay.
One with 10 feet, he wanted to come out the door and have everything level, and there wasn't a lot of space in between the house and the retaining wall. And so with that situation, we had to come in because there was 10 feet of fill dirt there.
Yeah.
We had to come in and put piers underneath the pool and the cabana.
Okay. And in doing that, did you leave the retaining wall as a whole, or were you cutting that retaining wall and building it with it?
No. So the retaining wall, we didn't touch it at all. It stayed there.
Okay.
There was a slight elevation difference between the house and the top of the retaining wall, which we dealt with a couple of steps. Wasn't a big, type situation, but it required that the pool and the cabana be on piers.
Okay.
Next door, with the 6 foot elevation drop, the pool itself was going to be 3.5 to 5 feet deep. So we were close to the bottom of the pool being an existing grade.
Yeah.
So what we chose to do there was to take the retaining wall, and we blew part of the retaining wall out and used the pool as part of the retaining wall.
Yeah.
We also stepped down in the yard off the porch, set the pool lower than the yard. And so the pool was an original grade. Now the cabana was still going to be way up in the air.
So you had to pier it.
No. So we went off the side of the pool and came and dropped it down. So that side of the pool was equivalent to a bar.
Okay.
I got the cabana down at the lower elevation.
Into grade.
Grade.
Yeah.
Now we don't have to have piers on this project because we were able to get the cabana in grade. We were able to get the pool in grade. Now it required a lot more retaining wall work because we blew out the existing wall. So there was more walls, there was more steps in that particular situation, but the client that fit the needs of what they were looking for as well, versus the other gentleman wanted everything at the same level.
Yeah.
2 houses right next to each other, totally different structural setups, but totally worked fine.
Yeah. Same soil, same everything.
Soil,
yeah.
Everything was the same. So, but you have to decide if you're going to be doing piers or if you're going to work with the existing grade to make sure you get your structures in the right situation. The next thing that you got to think about when you come in and do some major cuts into a hillside is what happens if it rains.
Well, then it falls apart. It caves in. And you don't want that, especially if it's retaining a house or anything, really. You don't want a falling wall.
So we did a photo shoot last week.
Yeah.
Night you went to the Rangers game.
That has a couple walls on it, that's for sure.
There was a retaining wall on the property line. Then we came in and did a 6 foot tall retaining wall. Then we came to the pool deck area. Then we had the spa on that upper terrace. Then it dropped down 30 inches to the pool terrace. The pool terrace was 2 feet above the ground. So we had all these different levels.
Yeah.
So when we cut into the hillside, the pool's 6 feet deep. So we've got all this cut plus a 6 foot drop in the pool. And if you just tried to start building that and it rained, it was all going to cave in.
So what did you do to prevent that?
So we came in and flashed everything.
Oh, okay.
We sprayed gunite. If you ever see road construction, when they're cutting into the hillside so they can come in and build an overpass, they always come in and gunite the walls on the sides to keep the soil in place during the construction of that as they're starting to build it. So we do the same exact thing.
Yeah.
We just spray gunite to hold the soil into place. I had a project a number of years ago in Frisco, and we came in and dug the pool and again had a big elevation change. The cut was probably close to 10 feet tall. Once you had from the floor of the pool down, plus the pool retaining walls and a drop beam, and there was a neighbor's retaining wall behind it. and we were going to go flash the pool.
Yeah.
And we started to flash the pool, and it started raining.
Oh, no.
And so the flash wasn't holding.
No.
And it rained all night long. And so the next morning, I drove over to the job site, and the neighbor's retaining walls in the bottom of the pool.
Oh, my God.
Along with the part of their fence. And the house was only 10 feet away from the property line.
Oh, wow.
So we're looking at maybe losing, dirt right up to the neighbor's house. Now, this gentleman was in construction, and he was like, I understand stuff happens. That's why you have insurance. We'll be good. I want a pool. So figure out how you can dig this thing and stabilize this slope so we can get this done. Because obviously flashing's not going to work.
Yeah. With a 10-foot drop just with flashing.
So talked to the engineer, and everybody came up with all these different solutions on how to hold the slope intact. But it was after the shell of the pool was done. And I'm like, we got to get the shell in before any of this happens. So again, roadside construction helped me out.
How so?
So they were doing the toll road through Frisco.
Okay. How long ago was this again?
This was in 2002.
Okay. That makes sense because the roads take so long to build here in Texas.
So this was the toll road.
Yeah.
It hadn't got to Frisco yet.
Okay.
So it was going into Frisco. And they had done some major cuts, and there were columns not flashing that were holding these into place.
I know what you're talking about. Yep. Yeah.
So what they do is they come in and they drill piers.
Just to hold it up.
And they pour the pier, and they come in and do piers like 2 feet apart, and they'll put an 18-inch pier in. And then they come back the next day in between those after the first, every other one's set up, and they drill in between those, and then they pour the other ones. So you end up with a virtual, then you peel the concrete.
So it's a wall pretty much.
It's a wall to hold it. And then you peel the dirt off, and basically the concrete's left, the pier's left there as your retaining wall.
Yeah.
So we backfilled the pool that we had dug and caved in, and came in and got a pier rig on the site, and came in and drilled piers, and then re-excavated out up to the edge of the piers, and the piers held the hillside in place.
So that became the retaining wall. So that fell previously.
No, we had to build the retaining wall.
Aesthetically, you have to make it look good, but
no, it's still, that wasn't on the property line. So, but that held the retaining wall in place, so it didn't cave in behind it.
Was it like a meantime thing? So once y'all were done, y'all removed the piers? Or?
Oh no, so the pool, the shell got shot up right against it.
Oh, okay.
And so it's the pool, the shells was in front of the piers. Okay. So the piers stayed there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Now what happened afterwards was there was a lawsuit in the subdivision.
Oh boy.
About 6 years later. What had happened is they had come in and backfilled a stream. And so the water was running in this old stream bank.
The drainage for the subdivision.
And so what happened was, it wasn't the rain that caused this wall to blow out.
Mm-hmm.
It was the water went down into that under-terrain stream and started flowing through there, and that eroded everything out, and that was right where my pool hole was.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, so... But flashing generally will stabilize your slope.
Yeah.
Enough that you can get the shell of the pool in. And then once the shell of the pool's in, you're good. As long as you have drainage behind the shell.
Yeah.
So we did a pool shoot the other day on a project that was on a hillside. And we had put a French drain in.
Yeah.
You remember all the water running off of it?
Yeah, it was gushing out. I've seen a couple of jobs. Just water moving underground is a crazy thing because you can't see it visibly until it comes out from underground, but water moves with a less resistant spot. So it's a tricky thing to narrow down. But yeah, y'all put that French drain in, and it's working, but gushing out water.
Yeah, it was like a stream running out of this pipe at the very end. Where you see that's usually the worst is when you have a hillside and then it starts to flatten out and you're at the bottom of the hill.
Yeah.
So all that water runs subsurfacely underneath the hill, and it hits the bottom part, and that's where you definitely have to deal with it. But as you go back up the hill, the farther you are down the hill, the more water you have to deal with.
Yeah.
When you're at the top, not a problem. But drainage becomes very, very important when you're dealing with hillside design. You want to make sure you have French drains and also pick up all the water that's coming in to get away and deal with it and manage it in the best way possible. So the gravity works great. And when gravity doesn't, make sure you get it into pipes and get it out of the area that you're working in.
I think it's also a huge benefit when you have a hillside because of drainage, because you can do cool stuff and not rely on a sub pump. So, for instance, a sunken fire pit, sunken cabana, those are two of my favorite features in general when it comes to architecture in the backyard. And that is the drainage. You don't have to rely on, a mechanism to pump it out and create a bathtub when it, fails. So
both of those situations, I have gravity drains that work. Now, when you're in Houston or you're in Florida, I know that's not possible because everything's so flat. But here, if we have some slope, then that's the ideal situation, is not to have to use a sump pump. And that way we have less problems as we go along. The one thing when we have a hillside that comes into play is we're going to have stairs.
Yeah.
And one thing that I've seen on designs that makes a huge difference is how wide the stairs are.
Yeah.
For a couple different reasons. One is if I'm looking down a staircase, I have more visibility than if I'm looking at, basically a retaining wall and a walkway. If I'm looking down the staircase, my line of sight is more unobstructed. And so I can see more of the pool and other elements that we're trying to look at. So if I've got a porch and I'm trying to look down to a pool and I don't want to obstruct the views, then I want to take all the stairs across that whole length. Now, if I have to add plants to it, I want the plants down at the lower elevation, not up at the top of the porch or something like that, because then you're going to add to blocking the view. One of the things, if you can coordinate with your builder, is you may want to do a drop brick ledge, so that can allow you to take veneer down and then have plants in front of it instead of building a retaining wall up to hide the foundation of the house. That's something to consider when you're dealing with an elevation change right next to an existing porch or foundation or something along those lines. If you're working with new construction,
that's a big detail, because I've seen some houses we've done projects that are awesome, and then you see that foundation of the house, and it's just like, oh, and then they stucco over it or something to make it look better. But it's like, if you would have planned for that in the beginning, you could have done some really, really cool.
Right. So it's just something to coordinate with. If you're early in the process, you can coordinate that with the builder and set that up so it's more of a finished look as you're trying to do stuff. The stair size also is just the comfort of moving people in larger groups up and down. 5 feet is as narrow as you can get two people to pass each other comfortably. And so if you have bigger gatherings, having, 6 to 8 feet wide feels much more generous and helps people transition up and down much easier than a smaller type situation. Now, that may not be necessary if you decide with your hillside that we're just going to keep it all one level. We're going to come in and build a big retaining wall on the back side of everything and level everything out. And so now everything's, comfortable to walk around, and we don't have to worry about going up and down stairs, and the pool's up at that level. Reed did that project up in Aubrey.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
Years ago. And, that's all just one level.
It's stunning, but he created a cliff by doing that. And that's another thing to think about. So when you go higher up and you keep it at one level, if your lot is dropping, the bigger the cliff you're going, when you.
Well, that's why you put safety rails up.
Well, no, I get that.
And all that type of situation.
But that job is perfect because of the scenery and everything around it. So not every job would be like that.
No, most of the time when I talk to people, there's three things you can do on a hillside. One is you can keep everything level with the house, which means there's a big retaining wall in the back.
Yeah.
The challenge with that is privacy.
Oh, okay.
So if you're dealing with a standard backyard, you got a 6-foot tall fence.
Mm-hmm.
You keep everything at one level.
It's not gonna.
Now you're on stage.
Yeah.
You're waving at the neighbor over there because now your 6-foot tall retaining wall is only 3 feet tall.
Yeah.
Above your deck, or 2 foot tall above your deck. Or the project that we did not too long ago, the pool's actually above the fence.
Yeah, you could step into their backyard.
Yeah, step on top of the fence.
Yeah.
From the pool deck.
Yeah. You could so that you can definitely terrace down behind the big drop, but for some yards, they're not big enough to do that.
So the one that where we could step on top of the fence,
yeah,
the yard's so narrow,
yep,
to come in and put stairs in would have eaten up the whole space.
Yeah.
So at that one side, the yard was 7 feet below the porch.
It's a big drop.
So the coming in the pool acted as part of that retaining wall.
Yeah.
So what we did is created other things for privacy on that particular pool deck. The screen that was built.
Yeah.
That was a clever solution.
Oh yeah.
That I didn't come up with. Somebody else did, and it looks really nice. Or you're going to terrace it, and the terracing is going to kind of follow the grade. So structurally, it's in the ground, so it's stable in that aspect. So when you do the big wall, you're probably going to have to pier quite a few things.
Yeah.
The other solution is I want to put everything at the lower elevation. Now, this hardly ever gets done. And the reason why they would do it is small lot, maximum privacy, but what that requires is a lot of steps and a lot of retaining walls basically on 3 sides of the property because you're going to base everything at the lowest point. Most people terrace, and then some people do the big wall, but you got to figure out which one you're going to do. But
so you're saying with the low point, they're going to step down all the way to the bottom elevation of the lot, and then they're going to have their living space.
Correct.
Yeah, that doesn't seem ideal for little lots.
No, it's not. But some people will want that because of the privacy issue.
Makes sense, yeah.
I suggest that there's other ways to create privacy most of the time that are going to be more cost effective for you than doing a ton of masonry and dropping down into basically a hole. But if you do terrace, it's very common that we're going to use the pool as part of that retaining. Now, what that goes to is, as I think about projects, I think about function. So when I'm dealing with a hillside, I want to think about the increments that I'm working and what I might be able to incorporate to be part of the solution. So I'm just going to rattle through my list of increments and what they are. So the first thing is I've got a 6-inch increment, and a 6-inch increment is a stair. So pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
The 12-inch increment is nothing. There's nothing that's 12 inches tall that when I'm designing except for a fire pit. And that's usually not going to be used from a retaining standpoint.
Now, some people might say their fire pit's going to be 18. Why do you do 12? Just side note real quick.
Well, I like 12 because it's a footrest.
Okay.
I don't want to sit on the edge of it or have people sit on the edge of it because there's fire in the middle.
Yeah.
So I don't encourage
that makes sense.
18 because people will want to sit there. 18, though, makes a great seat wall. So if I have an 18-inch drop in elevation, I could have a seat wall. If I have a 24-inch, I can still work that as a seat wall in most cases, unless the clients are real short. The 30 inches is table height. So I have now a functional table if I build something that's 30 inches tall.
Yeah.
The other thing is I can do 36. Now I have counter height. Okay. So it works from a working standpoint. The other thing you could do that's 36 inches is you could do a sunken fire pit with a back. So you have an 18-inch seat
Mm-hmm.
and you have an 18-inch back, and that's 36 inches. Or you can go to 42 and you have a bar countertop.
Okay.
Also, with the 42, you could do the sunken fire pit with a tall back to it. 48 is typical, the retaining wall height. So those are my increments that I'm looking at designing. So when I come in and do a sunken into a hillside and I'm trying to work in an outdoor kitchen, well, my outdoor kitchen might be part of the retaining wall.
Yeah. You want functional spaces. You don't want dead space that's, just a wall. If you can make it have two purposes, that's better than one.
Right. We're going to take a break here for a second and get into outdoor living. So with outdoor living, we like to go to barbecue bits here. We're going to share some information of everything that you may want to consider in your outdoor living space as far as features, especially for the kitchen. Hope you enjoy this. So the three things that everybody wants in an outdoor kitchen, the number one thing is they want to cook. Right. The number two thing is, I usually talk to people about, is trash, but the third is, I want a refrigerator. Right. And what they're thinking is, I had a dorm refrigerator, that type setup, does that work? So talk me through refrigerators, pros, cons, different types, what we're cooling, that type thing.
So in Texas and in your Sunbelt states, a lot of people will come into our stores and they'll say, listen, I would love an outdoor refrigerator, but I heard they just don't work. The dorm refrigerators, like you said, they will not work. What's the difference between an outdoor and an indoor? It has to do with that robust compressor, number one. But there's a lot more DNA in an outdoor refrigerator than what you think that makes it UL listed outdoor. That's going to be a recovery fan that reappropriates the air. It's going to be the front vent on the particular unit so you can breathe. But one other thing that a lot of people don't know, you can put plated food in here, but the interior of the fridge has to be stainless steel. That's one reason why it's designed or designated UL listed for outdoor use, is what it is.
Okay. So is there different lifespans of those, an indoor and outdoor in an outside environment?
There is. They struggle. So we'll have a 100-degree day today, and you're in Phoenix, you're probably 107. And if you do a standard 24, the 20-inch fridge, it's probably going to get down to 44. A day like today, this will hold right at 33, 34. Even if it's a glass front, it's bronze and it's sleeved. It has an airspace in here, and it can take any of the element that we give to it. So.
Okay. Is there a reason you do a glass-fronted one versus not glass?
A lot of times our customers, the most popular is the glass because you have, True has what's called True Lumina. You can do different colors from red, green, blue, purple. You can match your existing equipment. So if you had a backlit amber, I can set backlit amber. You have to be a little organized with this. One thing about their refrigeration is we can put a wine bottle cradle down here below for white wines. It's for a quick party, for a quick party solution, for a wine solution, they offer that. And then on our last specified job we did, you can now have these in different colors. I think we blacked one out. It's called Stealth Black. You can have the color match the actual equipment. It's pretty cool. There's a lot of custom options.
Yeah. So you mentioned wine. Are there different units specifically for wine? If you wanted, one with wine and one with soft drinks, do people do that type thing?
There is. But the wine captains come in a 2-zone or a single zone. So that would be white and sparkling. I'm not a wine connoisseur. Most of my customers will buy a single zone wine, and bigger is better. They'll do a 24 wide. This company also makes what we call a slide top. So if you have a lot of kids and you're looking at an outdoor ice cooler, we can show you a version that would hold like 108 cans, and it's kind of a volume reservoir, refrigerator. So,
awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for that information.
Yep, you bet.
So I hope you enjoyed the barbecue bits that we just featured today, and we'll have more coming up next week. If there's something in particular that you're interested for, let us know, and we'll get back into the episode now. So I had a project a number of years ago and an 8-foot elevation change.
Okay.
Now, I ask people lots of questions, and one of the things I asked them was, what's your average size gathering and what's your large? And they said, well, our large is 150.
Oh, wow.
I said, 150?
Yeah, that's crazy.
What are you doing with 150 people?
Throwing weddings every weekend?
They had youth group activities from their church.
Well, that's perfect.
And so they said, we have lots of kids that are going to be coming over here. So that's not going to happen with a lot of frequency, but it will happen some.
Yeah.
So when I designed the project, I had 4 walls that were all 24 inches tall to deal with the elevation change. So
That's
those
perfect.
4 walls all became seat walls.
Yeah.
So I could easily accommodate 150 people on this particular project. So you just have to look at how you're going to use the space, and what might be a retaining wall might also serve a function. One thing also I forgot to mention is if you have over 4 foot, then I need to break it up with something. Case in example, the project that we photographed the other night with the big hillside, there was a seat bench built in to the side of the big retaining wall.
Yeah.
So it gave somebody a place to sit and hang out close to the spa, and also close to where the slide went down. So, if there was a real long line for the slide, you could hang out and sit down, rest your feet for a minute. But you may want to look at layering things in front of a big wall to tone the wall down. You might have a big wall and maybe you put the kitchen against it, or fire pit, built-in seating, that type situation. One place that a lot of times people think there's not a lot of slope, but there is in rear entry lots where the garage faces an alley, and usually that garage driveway has a pretty significant slope on it. And so those are really tiny yards, but you have to deal with all the elevation of that from the front to the back.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they're terraced. Most commonly on a lot of those, because the privacy becomes an issue, is we would build a retaining wall along the back and raise the whole yard up and then build the fence on top of it.
Yeah.
So then we would end up with a fence that might be 6 feet on top of a 3 foot tall wall. So from the alley, it's 9 feet tall. We have plenty of privacy, and we have a flat lot to deal with, but still a 3 foot wall, your shell, your pool is going to be in the ground. So it's not a problem at all. But that's a small space that you really need to think about, if you're not building a wall, how you're going to deal with the elevation changes in there. Those lots can be tricky. The other thing that can be really tricky is what we call a cross slope. Most people, when you go out and measure.
Yeah, I've had a couple of these, and they confuse me a little bit. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
When I'm drawing them, because I'm trying to connect the points, and I'm like, this doesn't make sense because this is over here and that's over there. So
what happens is when you take measurements, you want to go all the way and take measurements to the corners of the yard. Yeah. You may not be dealing with the whole thing, but that really helps you understand how the cross slope might work. Because sometimes this corner over here might be down 24 inches in the yard, and then the other corner might be down 60 inches in the yard. Well, it doesn't slope uniformly out. No. That's just our natural thought process is that it does. And that's where people get bit, because they take a measurement down the center and assume
that's bad. Yeah.
That it's the same going both ways.
No.
So if you want to take the edges and know what the edges do to make sure you understand how the drainage works, and also how the cross slope may work. And those sometimes are the coolest projects, because you end up with these different levels going across your view instead of just going front to back. So it ends up with some really cool, interesting projects if you understand how to work with that element and come up with creative solutions. Now, one thing that you got to be careful about too is if you've got a retaining wall that's existing, you can only dig so close to it.
Yeah. Is it a 1-by-1 rule?
That's usually what most people look at, is a 1-by-1. So if the wall's 10 feet tall, some people are like, well, you need to be 10 feet away.
Yeah.
Other people are like, well, it depends on the hole that you're digging. So if you're going down 6 feet, I want you to be 6 feet away from the bottom of it. But again, you need to get with an engineer and talk to them about what's going to be the best situation for you. so you don't create a challenge with an existing wall. So one of the things that when we're doing measurements and we have a wall that's on the property line, we want to measure the height of that wall. Sometimes we're sloping over a long distance.
Yeah.
And when we slope across a long distance, one of the things you can do is you can build walkways like a ramp.
Yeah. We have that one job where we're doing a sidewalk ramp type deal around a tree to deal with the grade without putting it in a bunch of steps.
Right. That client doesn't walk very easily.
No.
And so what I wanted to do was minimize the amount of steps, and it's a 10-foot drop that we're dealing with. So we had some steps, and we had a landing, and then the landing slopes down to the next set of steps. And then we have a landing that slopes down to the next set of steps, and then a landing that slopes to the next set of steps. So by doing that, we were able to eliminate a number of steps and then create something. So when we slope it, what we look at is a handicap ramp, which is 8% slope. And so we don't want to make it any steeper than that. So it's comfortable to go up and down.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking in my head, where's the bar where you go from steps to slope? So that makes sense.
The other project that we're looking at, tearing a pool out with the big tennis court that we're changing to a pickleball court. Because of the size of that yard, they wanted to have a walking path around the whole yard.
Mm-hmm.
And so on that one, there's no steps in it at all because we've got the distance. Basically, you can drop about a foot in 10 feet. And so if your slope is flatter than that, then you can typically slope a walk without being a problem. And it can be nice to transition without going up and down stairs, which I appreciate as my knees and hips get older. Now, one thing that's the most common situation to deal with an elevation change is people are like, I can do a vanishing edge.
Yeah, that's a very good solution.
So we can have an upper pool and a lower pool, and the water can disappear over the edge, and this helps deal with the retaining of the slope that we've got. And so a lot of times with that style of pool, you don't want to terrace. You want to keep everything level, which keeps your lines of sight of the tank to a minimum, because the lower the tank is, the less likely you are going to see it. So a vanishing edge is a great solution for some hillside situations. Now, a variety of that I do with some frequency is what I call a double pool.
Yeah, the double decker.
So we have an upper pool and we have a vanishing edge that goes across, but it's not so much as a visual situation as the functions are different on the two levels. We've got a recreational pool with a large tanning ledge, and everybody's hanging out in that space, and we just want shallow water. And then we want the active pool. We want a lot of activity. We want to dive. We want to slide. We want all those things. And those go down into the lower pool.
You don't want any obstacles in the way. There's no bar stools. There's nothing like that where someone's going to jump and, land on that.
Right. The bar stool would be in the top one.
Exactly.
The hangout pool. And so by doing that, the transition of your slide and the height that you need for the slide is a lot of times hidden. Because the lower pool's down lower, and so you enter the slide up at the top of the slide, and you go down, and you don't see it if there's a 6 foot, but or maybe the slide only sticks up a couple of feet.
Yeah,
we did the one project there in Quail Hollow last year that had a slide built in from an upper to a lower.
Yeah,
but it only went 4 feet. They did a little slide.
Yeah.
But that's what they wanted because the where the slide had to be located was on their primary line of sight coming in the front door. And so they wanted not to look out and see a slide, but they wanted a slide. So that came up with the best solution for them. As they transitioned from the upper to lower pool, they were both functional. The other thing was with their upper pool, they wanted a sunken fire pit.
Yeah.
And that sunken fire pit made the upper pool not real functional from a space standpoint. There was a tanning ledge, there was a spa, there was a sunken fire pit, and it was a big pool, but there wasn't a whole lot of swimming space left.
The sunken fire pit was in the pool.
In the pool.
For people that don't.
It was surrounded by water on all sides.
Yes.
So the lower pool became just more open recreational space for the kids to interact and play. But a double pool is a lot of times a nice solution for a hillside. We're doing one right now that if they bought the house, the pool was done. It was a parade home. The pool wasn't very big, and they're like, we want to dive and we want to slide, and this isn't big enough. Should we just blow the whole thing up? And my suggestion was, well, there's a lot of elevation change in this yard, so why don't we just build a second pool at the lower elevation, and that way we can, accommodate that and it'll fit versus having to build some big wall out in the backyard and you not have any privacy, as you went into the yard. So that's a lot of times a cool thing. Now, one thing everybody assumes with a hillside pool is I'm going to see cool water features. How many of the pools are we retaining the hill that goes up?
We've done a couple.
A couple.
Yeah, we've done a couple. So versus what we've been talking about where it goes down, the water features you wouldn't see on that pool.
Right. So about 80%,
Typically.
80% of the pools that I've done, the hill's going down.
Yeah.
So when you put that water feature in, if the water feature is a visual thing for the client versus a sound feature for the client,
yeah,
they're not going to see it unless they're in the pool itself.
Yeah.
Which some clients are fine with that. But you need to explain it to them up front so they don't
they get the right expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
when you have a house that's going uphill in the backyard,
then most definitely you see the water features. So, in fact, we've got several projects that we've got water walls on the back of them to create really cool water features and also act as retaining walls for the project.
Yeah.
But what you want to do is make sure that you understand if we're trying to achieve sound or if you're trying to achieve visual, what you're going to actually see from inside the house.
It's actually kind of funny because that one job I'm thinking of that we shot, I think a year ago or something like that, where it goes uphill. We did the big water wall with the line burner on it. There's a lot of homeowners that saw that job and wanted that in their backyard.
Right.
But their yard didn't go uphill like that.
It went down.
Yeah. And so you create this, I don't know, it's every yard has a benefit. You just have to understand how to play with it.
That's the fun of design,
for
sure. The steps as you go down, sometimes there's not enough room or you try to accommodate multiple things. So there was a project that we did in Argyle last year. It was pretty small. And we had steps coming off the porch to a terrace. And on that terrace, we wanted to put lounge chairs. And then we had enough room to then have another set of steps to go down to the pool, but there wasn't enough room for a sidewalk there.
Yeah.
So we did what I call dry steps going into wet steps.
Okay.
So you walk down those dry steps and then you walk right onto the tanning ledge.
Yeah.
There's no sidewalk in between the steps and the tanning ledge itself. But what that allowed was enough functional space in between the two sets of steps that there could be lounge chairs.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would be just a walkway, steps, and then a walkway. So functionally, that didn't work as well for them.
No.
Now, there was a sidewalk level with the pool around the other side. But again, it's all about space and trying to fit all the pieces in.
Well, I think they also, the dry steps going into the wet steps, it creates, like I know with your double spa, that's really cool. It creates a similar feature where you can sit on the steps and have your feet comfortably in the water like you would with the normal pool. But you could also sit right next to the pool, another level, like another level higher the step, and you could just be out of the water watching. And I don't know, it's a very cool thing that I haven't seen often that I thought was really cool. So
one of the cool things is to have a vanishing edge on the pool.
Yeah.
But if you got to think about what you're going to do below the vanishing edge, and some people are like, well, I want to sit there and look at the vanishing edge, which is totally understandable. But one of the things about a vanishing edge is the water vanishes into
the basin.
Well, it vanishes into the grass, or it vanishes into the lake, or
Oh,
it
I gotcha.
vanishes into the, the woods behind. And so that's that cool sight line. And if you put furniture back there and the furniture sticks up above the vanishing edge weir,
Yeah.
then you look across and you see the top of a couch.
Yeah.
And it breaks the view up. So it's helpful to understand if there's going to be furniture there, how tall the furniture is.
Mm-hmm.
You can accommodate it. Like I had a project a number of years ago, and spectacular project in every way. But then the interior designer picked these big couches, and you can see the top of the couches over the weir. And if I'd have known that, I could have dropped that patio 6 more inches.
Yeah.
And then they would have disappeared.
Yeah.
And that would have been a better visual effect from inside the house. So it's just a detail that you want to think about as you're putting all the pieces together, is what's going to be below there and what visibility you're going to have of that.
That reminds me of a job that we went on to, and they had a pond. It wasn't really a lake; it was a pond in the backyard, and they wanted a negative edge to match up with the pond, but you have to have it at a certain level for them to line up, or else you'll have a gap in between. And you try to explain to them that it wasn't, you could do it, but I don't know. It was a little. You have to be precise, because imagine trying to match up with a lake or a pond, and when you look out, you see a gap in between the two.
It's not a water-to-water connection.
No, exactly.
So a lot of times there's going to be a water to landscaping to water connection. So this is where your 3D modeling.
Oh, it helps so much.
It helps so much to explain to somebody, but you want to also accurately show what you're doing. So if you show a water-to-water connection and that's not really what it's going to look like,
yeah,
that's where you get into trouble later on.
Yeah.
As we look at, I'm just going to throw an example out here, how you work down a hillside. We come off the porch, and we may have 4 steps that go down the length of the porch. They're going to drop 24 inches. Therefore, the retaining walls on both sides will be 24 inches tall, so I can use those as seat walls. I'll have a terrace there, and preferably that terrace has a little bit of size to it, so I can put some furniture in that area. But I don't want to put it in my primary lines of sight. I want it kind of off to the side. But then I might also have the spa up on that terrace, the top of the spa, and then I step down 24 more inches to the pool deck terrace, and now the spa is raised 24 inches above that deck, so I can use it as seating. On the back side of the pool, then I might do a 42-inch drop beam, which then I can use that 42 inches as it drops there as like a bar counter. So if I'm standing back there on the ground, then that works from a height standpoint, which is similar to what we did with the lazy river that we took pictures of just the other day.
Yeah.
But that only gets you down close to 8 feet in elevation, and sometimes projects are more than 8. So the next solution is I'm going to put a retaining wall after the pool, and that retaining wall might be 4 foot tall, and then I can put some plants in between the pool shell and the retaining wall and give a little bit of softening and a buffering type situation. Now I've got down, close to 12 feet in elevation. But some hillsides are even bigger than that. But that's a common scenario on how you could step things that are still functional and have terracing involved in that situation. So hopefully that's helpful to people that are looking at and considering some different things, and come up with how we could work the best on your hillside. If you again go to my YouTube account and search the word hillside, there are a ton of videos there of all different solutions of hillside design. Everything from small hillsides that are 3 feet, and some people would be like, that's not a hillside, that's a mole. But in other projects that have elevation drops of 30 feet. So we're just going to run through a couple of projects real quick one that went up and one that went down,
Yeah.
and walk through those scenarios from a design concept standpoint. So the first project's in Fort Worth. This project, I'm driving up the street and I'm looking into a backyard and I'm like, that's the craziest backyard I've ever seen. And I turn on the next block and turn in and look at the house address, and that was the backyard. So there was over 40 feet of fall in that particular backyard. When I was there measuring the job site, the only person that used the backyard was using it. And that was their dog. And their dog would take a tennis ball up to the top of the hill and drop it, and it would bounce all the way down the bottom of the hill. And then he would run and go get it and carry it to the top and then drop it again and watch it bounce all the way down and then go get it again. And this was back before cell phones had video capability. This would have been a phenomenal TikTok video.
Yeah, it seems like the dog discovered gravity.
Yeah.
It's ahead of his time for his kind.
It was a great moment. So this particular project, we came out of the house and basically came in with a retaining wall right up against the house that dropped down 4 feet to a walkway. And from that 4-foot walkway, I dropped down another 4 feet. And on that terrace, there was the spa. Now, one of the things that we did is this was one of the first jobs that I used a lot of synthetic turf as patio areas.
Okay.
And so what it did is it brought some greenery in with all this masonry and kind of softened it up. And so this spa is basically sitting in, a terrace of synthetic grass. So the spa is flush with the patio, but then it drops another 4 feet down to the pool. And in that 4 feet, we had some waterfalls. We had a grotto built into the side of it, and then the spillway coming out of the spa. And we had a very narrow, long pool in that area. And then the drop beam dropped down 3 feet. So you could walk across, and then it dropped another, from there, a retaining wall, it dropped down 6 more feet. So it ended up this huge terraced hillside. The cabana they wanted to put out by the pool, there was no way in the world that it would work in the space. And so the cabana was actually on the uphill. When you came out at the side of the house, the outdoor kitchen was there, the cabana was there, and we put actually curtains on the cabana so you could pull the curtains because it was so close to the driveway. And that way it gave them privacy on all 3 sides when they were sitting in the cabana. And also it gave them some protection because there was a fireplace in there in the middle of the winter. You could, as you got out of the spa and came up, that type of situation, you could hang out there. But that was an extreme hillside going down that we just dealt with it in chunks to make it as functional as possible. So the opposite was a project that went uphill. And so we came into that particular one, and they wanted something that looked really, really cool. And it was all about a place to hang out. This is a very small pool. And we came in with a water wall in the back and took out the existing retaining walls and pushed the water wall back as close as we could to code to the property line, which gave us a little more depth than what the existing walls were. And then we came in with the water wall, but they wanted something dramatic beyond that. So they wanted fire incorporated somehow. So what we did is across the whole length of the bottom of the pool, at the bottom of the water wall, we have a line burner. So that lights up, and the light coming off the flames with the water coming down this water wall is just extremely spectacular. The house was done very contemporary with a black and white contrast. So we did the same thing with the pool. The pool interior was black. The water wall was black. And then we came in with white decking that surrounded it. Now, because of the hillside, and we had to transition up about 3 to 4 feet because the house was built on different levels. We came in with a tanning ledge up above. And when people look at it initially, a lot of people are like, oh, that's a spa that's up there, but there's ledge loungers in the center of it. So it's not a spa. It's actually a tanning ledge on the upper level. And then we had the water cascade off the tanning ledge, kind of like a perimeter overflow, vanishing edge effect. And then it goes into a middle basin to allow us to hold the steps going up into the middle room. And then the only way you could get to that was stepping on a floating pad to get across. Very small pool. In fact, the benches and the steps ran the full length on the house side. And it's not your typical wedding cake. You step on one, you step out to the next, you step out to the third. This went sideways. So you stepped in the corners, you stepped towards the middle, and you step again towards the middle to walk into the bottom of the pool. So just a real cool, totally two different situations that you could look at on going up and going down.
Yeah.
From a solution standpoint.
Yeah, those two jobs are awesome.
They're hillsides, totally different, but they made totally spaces that were hardly usable at all, totally functionable for the friends and families that gathered there.
Oh yeah, pushing the limits to the max.
Well, and that's the whole thing is most hillsides don't get used, but by the dog. And so what we want to do is create a space that, can be functional for you and your family to create something cool. So if you've got questions about the things we talked about, please send those in through social media, or there's a spot on the website that you can do that as well. As you're looking at things, and if this podcast was helpful, or somebody that's going to design a project on a hillside, please share it with them. And that's why we make the podcast, because in certain parts of the country, there's not a whole lot of people that have worked on hillsides. So this should help you come up with some creative ways to deal with your project.
And what was the website that they can submit questions at? What was it called?
Poolsideperspectivepodcast.com.
And Instagram and YouTube, they're Poolside Perspective as well?
Correct.
Perfect.
And then I gave some examples of some projects, and also that you could search. That's my YouTube personal channel, which is Farley Designs. So hopefully that's all helpful for you, and we'll talk to y'all later.
Have a good one.